Hi, this is Sean D'Souza, and you're listening to the 3-Month Vacation Podcast. This podcast isn't some magic trick about how to work less. Instead, it's about how to really enjoy the work that you do and to enjoy your vacation time. Hi, I'm Sean D'Souza, and you're listening to the 3-Month Vacation. You've probably heard of Batman. But how does Batman get summoned by the police commissioner? Imagine this scenario. Imagine Batman was being summoned by a pager. Every time there was a crime in Gotham City, that pager would go off in Batman's pouch, and he would then have to respond to that crime. Now compare the pager with the bat signal. The bat signal is a distress signal that appears in various interpretations of the Batman myth. According to Wikipedia, it's a specially modified Klieg searchlight with a stylized symbol of a bat, so that it projects a very large bat on the sky or on the buildings of Gotham City. No one knows for sure how that pager got thrown away and how this elaborate bat signal came into play, but we know one thing for sure. The pager is no match for the bat signal. The bat signal is Batman's trigger. Most of us don't have such an elaborate trigger every time we want to achieve something. Let's say we want to go for a walk every day, or maybe we want to wake up every morning and we want to do some yoga. Maybe we want to learn how to draw or to write or do something like maybe learn a language. We seem to fall by the wayside simply because we don't have a trigger. But is it just a trigger? In episode number 14, I'd covered this concept of the trigger, but since then I've realized that it's a lot more. In The Power of the Habit by Charles Duhigg, he specifically talks about three elements that need to be in place. In this episode, we're going to cover these three elements, and then we're going to add the fourth missing element that makes all the difference. To create a good habit or bad habit, you have to have three core elements in place. They are cue, routine, and reward. But just having a cue, routine, and reward is not enough. What makes it more powerful is the power of the group. In this episode, we're going to take a look at what is a cue, what is a routine, and what is a reward, and how groups help tremendously. Let's start off with the first element, which is a cue. Let's go back to 1900. In 1900, one of the biggest problems that America had was that most people didn't brush their teeth. And we're not talking about just a few people, but most people. Now imagine that you are someone who manufactures toothpaste and you want the entire country, possibly the entire world, to use toothpaste. What do? If you're lucky, you have someone like Claude Hopkins around. So who was Claude Hopkins? Claude Hopkins was an advertising genius. He wrote the book Scientific Advertising. And as the story goes, Mr. Hopkins was approached by an old friend, and this friend had an amazing new creation. It was a minty, frothy toothpaste named Pepsodent. He somehow had to convince everyone that they needed Pepsodent. He had to create a cue. He had to create this trigger. Now, Hopkins was a very methodical guy, so he got a whole bunch of dental textbooks, and then he went through it. It was terrible, dry reading. But in the middle of one of those books, he found a reference to something, and that something was mucin plaques on teeth. So Claude Hopkins gives it a name. He calls it film, like film on teeth. So when you wake up every morning, you have this kind of film on your teeth. Most of us don't notice it. Well, we didn't notice it back in 1900. Having film on teeth is a naturally occurring phenomenon, and you don't have to worry about it too much. But Hopkins used it as the trigger, as the bat signal. He started running ads all over the place. He said, just run your tongue over your teeth and you will feel that film. And the ads went on to suggest that it makes your teeth look off color, and then it invites decay. And then he pushed that button further. He said millions are using this new method of teeth cleaning. Why would any woman have dingy film on her teeth? In that one action, with that one poster and that one ad campaign, Claude Hopkins changed the habit by sending out the signal that when you wake up every day, you're going to have that film on your teeth. You're going to run your tongue over it and you're going to feel it. That becomes the trigger. This is the starting point for every habit. For instance, you might have an alarm clock that goes off and tells you to wake up and to go and do your yoga or to meditate. In my case, I have Tuesdays, which is when I record my podcast. I know that by Tuesday morning, I've got to get the podcast out in the morning. It's not enough to have the cue because we will all sleep through the alarm. We will all let our Tuesdays slip into Wednesdays. And before you know it, it's Friday. And then you're all stressed out. To solve that problem, we have to go to the second part, which is the routine. What is the routine all about? When I started out many years ago as a cartoonist, I used to do 2 sets of comic strips. These were 5 days a week for 2 separate newspapers. We're talking about 10 comic strips every single week. The thing is that I was young, I was in my 20s, and I didn't have time to think about my actions. When the newspaper editor said, "Would you like to put a comic strip in our newspaper 5 days a week?" I said yes. But then the second editor said the same thing, and I said yes to that as well. When you sit down and you think about it, do you really want to do a comic strip every single day? Wouldn't it be better to do one every week or every 15 days? And what I found surprised me a great deal. I found that it was easier to do 1 or even 2 comic strips every single day, rather than to do 1 every 15 days. And you know this to be true because when you go for a walk, it's much easier to go for a walk on a regular basis or to do something on a regular basis than to do it once in every 15 days. So we went from cartooning and then we switched over to marketing in the year 2000. And I started up this website, this membership site called 5000bc.com. Now, in 2003, it started out and it's still going. We still have our members, we still have a great time, but that's not the point. The point was when I started out in 5000 BC, I had very little ability to write. And I had no knowledge about membership sites. But I was a member of a website called bmyers.com. I don't know if it still exists, but Bill Myers used to write an article on technology or something like that every day, and so his articles came out 5 times a week. So I decided, okay, that's what a membership site is all about. Let me write 5 times a week. Now at this point I was struggling to write 1 article every 2 days. But since I had promised our members that I would write 5 articles a week, that's what I started doing. On Monday morning, Tuesday morning, Wednesday morning, every day I'd go writing 1 article a day. Somehow I would finish the article. And what I found was that with the routine, it was much easier to do things on a regular basis. It was much easier to write the articles. And so we took these concepts and we started applying them to our courses. When we first started our courses, we ran a completely different article writing course to what we do today. At that point in time, someone would write an article and they would do so once a week. Then I would look at it, I would comment on it, they would go away, they would come back, they would write another article, and that would be another week. When you think about it, that's pretty good to be able to write 1 article a week. But what happens is that habit doesn't set in place. So if you skip 1 week, then it's very easy to skip the next week. Essentially, what you've got to do is you have to have what is called a daily assignment. And so we started putting in daily assignments, and that evolved over the years to the point where it is now very finely tuned. It's finely tuned because of the feedback, because of the changes that we've made. Now clients have assignments 5 days a week. They still write 1 article a week, but they write it efficiently, they write it beautifully, they write it with great drama, with excellent content. And so everything has kind of stayed the same, but everything has changed as well. And it's because of this routine. They show up every day, they look at other people's work, they figure out what they have to do. They are able to critique other people's work. They're able to see the mistakes that they can't see in their own work. And so you get faster and more efficient. And this applies to everything, to cartooning, to copywriting, to storytelling, to creating podcasts. I used to struggle with podcasts, as I've told you in many podcasts. I used to struggle with writing the script for 4,000 and 5,000 words, which is what each podcast amounts to every week. And over the last couple of years, I found that it's getting easier and easier to the point where I can do this almost in one morning. How did that happen? It happened because of the routine. When people say they're getting overwhelmed, they're referring to a lack of routine. No one says, I'm so overwhelmed because I have to brush my teeth. No one says, I'm so overwhelmed because I have to have a shower. All of these things are part of your routine. When they're part of your routine, you know what to do, you do it efficiently, and you get it out of the way. And you think, well, article writing must be different, drawing cartoons must be different, doing all of this other stuff must be different. And it's not. It's simply a factor of routine. Barely in 2014, we didn't have the podcast, we didn't have the Instagram account, we didn't have so many of the things that we're doing today. And so you would think, well, how can you take 5 days where you're already busy and then add in a whole podcast of 5,000 words? How can you sustain an Instagram account, or rather in our case, 3 Instagram accounts? How is it possible to put in so much more stuff in your day and not lose quality and not get overwhelmed? And the answer largely is based on routine. And this brings us to the end of the second part. The first part, we looked at the cue. What sets it off? What is the trigger? What is that bad signal? And the second thing is the routine. When you have that specific thing happening on a specific day or time, then you get to a point of efficiency and you start doing the same thing faster and better. And largely the overwhelm starts to go away. But that's not all of it. The third part is the reward, and this is very crucial. So let's go to the third part, which is the reward. Let's say you decided to start off doing yoga every morning and then one day you don't continue. Is there a reason for this? It's not because of the cue or the routine. It's possibly because of the reward. What you have to do is get a habit in place, and then you have to put a reward in place. All bad habits are created by rewards. Think about it. You start eating a muffin today at lunchtime, and then tomorrow at lunchtime, you're having another muffin. And then the day after, another muffin. So suddenly, the reward is in your mind before the cue, before the routine. Afternoon doesn't have to show up, and you're already thinking about that muffin. Bad habits work because of the reward. Good habits also need the reward. You need that energy. We go for a walk every day, and I've said this before, the reward is coffee, but not just any coffee. Because if we started getting crappy coffee, we would lose out on the reward concept. And then the whole routine and everything falls apart. We had to look for this cafe, and a cafe that was open early in the morning, maybe 6:45 in the morning, so that we could get great coffee at 6:45, because that's when we reach our destination. We have our coffee and then we turn around. Now, a lot of people say, I can be more disciplined than that. I don't need the coffee. I don't need the reward. And yes, you don't, but it takes way too much energy. All the bad habits work because they have a reward. There is not a single bad habit that you have that doesn't have an embedded reward right in the middle of it, which is why it's a bad habit in the first place. Even brushing your teeth, even having a shower, there is a reward for it, and that's why you do it. If it was negative, it was something that felt bad after you finished it, you wouldn't be interested in it. And that's what Pepsodent did. Pepsodent installed that concept. You've got film, you're going to take out the film, you're going to feel your breath all fresh and tingly. That was the reward. And it's this fresh and tingly thing that Pepsodent had that left all the other toothpaste companies confused, because what they did was they go, okay, so now we know people are going to brush their teeth and there's going to be a cue and a routine, and then that's it. So clean teeth is the reward, right? But it wasn't, because Pepsodent had citric acid. It also had mint oil, and it had some other exotic chemicals. When people brushed their teeth, they got this tingling sensation. And that tingling sensation, that was their reward. You can just imagine the other toothpaste companies going completely crazy. They're like, this is a toothpaste, ours is a toothpaste, what the hell is happening here? It took them a very long time to figure out that it's the tingling sensation that was the reward. That's what people were looking for. They were looking for that tingling sensation, because when they didn't get the tingling sensation, they would feel like they hadn't brushed their teeth, they hadn't got the reward. And so with the other toothpaste companies, the whole exercise fell flat on its face until they figured out that was the reward. And this is the reason why Pepsodent's sales continued to soar and why the other toothpastes continued to not do so well. And for us at least, it's the cue and the routine that makes us go for a walk, but it's the coffee that is stunningly good, and therefore we have that cue, routine, and reward. If you're working with clients, it's very important to understand this concept of reward. It needs to be in place right at the start. We do this in all our courses, in the article writing course, in the copywriting course, in the storytelling course, all the courses. We have one little thing. It's called the gold star. On Fridays, you get a gold star. So you have to do your assignment on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. And on Friday, after you've done your learning for the week, you get a gold star. Now, this is just a little icon. It's just a little icon in the forum. And you would think that people would not be interested with this icon, but they are, because it's a reward. People crave that icon. How do we know that? We know that because you take it away and you see their reaction. And people say, hey, where's my gold star for the week? So this reward can be tested. If you put a reward in place and you take away that reward, then that is your benchmark. That's how you know that the reward is really good. If you take it away and no one cares, you have to change your reward system. So you have the cue, you have the routine, but you don't just put a reward, you test that reward and take it away and see how people react. See how you react. And really that's what the book covers. It covers cue, routine, reward. But we found there is something more. There is something bigger, and that is the group. Without the group, it's far easier to fall off the bandwagon. But how do we define a group? You take more than one person, you get a group. 4 people, also a group. 8 people, also a group. 25 people, is that still a group? Yes. But it's not really a group. And this is what we found when we started doing any kind of training, both offline and online. Often when you sign up for a course, you have this pitch and you have this sales letter, and they talk about how there are thousands of people signing up and how there's going to be a massive group, and that's not a group. That is not a group. because it doesn't lead to a change in habit. The reason why a lot of people don't reach their goal is, of course, because there's bad instruction. But even when there's good instruction, the group is too large. So what we did was we had to break it down. We had to make the group smaller. So we went down to 25 people. Then the introverts stood up and they said, no, 25 people is like having 500 people. How many people do you need? I asked. And they said, how about 6? So that's how many people are in a group. 6 to 7 people. 2 people, that's just you and someone else, and that's the smallest group possible. However, to have that group, to have that habit in place, you have to have more than 2 people, because if one person doesn't turn up, then the other person is left to themselves. And so what you have to do, what we have to do, is to have a group of about 6 to 7 people, so that even for whatever reason, if 1 or 2 people don't turn up on that day, there are still enough numbers within that group to keep them commenting on each other's work, to keep evaluating each other's work, to keep that momentum going. The reason that the group is so important is because you get to know the other people. It becomes a social environment. But with 500 people, it's like, I don't know. It just seems so weird. You get lost. No one notices if you drop off. Even in a group of 25, it's very easy to drop off and no one notices. Yet the moment you have a tiny group, people notice. And what that causes you to do is to show up. And once you show up, you become a responsible member of that group. And then you're pushing the group forward, they're pushing you forward. Now you have a habit. Over the years, I've been trying to explore what is it that causes people to leave? What is it that causes people not to move forward? And in the last episode, or a couple of episodes before this, we explored why people leave. And one of the biggest reasons why they leave is because they don't feel wanted. They don't feel like they're contributing. They don't feel like they're part of that whole social setup. That's why we leave jobs. That's why we leave every single place that we walk out of. We decide that we're not part of it. No one cares. And we're all by ourselves, lonely, separate, thinking that only we are making the mistake. When you're in a group, you can see everybody else has the same problems or similar problems, and the group pushes you forward. And that brings us to the end of this podcast. What did we cover in this podcast? If you really want to create a habit, you have to start off with the reward. Yes, the reward. You want to put the reward, then take away the reward. Did it make any difference when you took it away? If people notice the difference, if you notice the difference, then the reward is really good. If no one notices it, it's not a great reward. So you start off with the reward. You set up the reward. Then you set up the cue. Then you set up the routine. And now you have cue, routine, reward. And it's really helpful to have a group as well. And the group can be really small. Like, for instance, when we go for a walk, it's just me and my wife, Renuka. But ideally, when you're training, when you're conducting something, you want to have a group of about 6 to 7 people. When you're working all by yourself, it's very difficult to form a habit. So here's what I would suggest. At a primary level, join a group. There is 5000 BC, as you would expect. I would tell you to join that. That's the membership site. And once you join, there are groups there, and they will help you move forward. We purposely keep the groups very small. For instance, we've taken the info products course, we've set up groups, and they're working through the info products course, or some people work through the article writing course. The second thing you want to do is you want to make sure that you join one of the courses. And yes, this is to learn, but also to see how you can teach in the future. A lot of what we're doing here, or what you're learning on this podcast, is learning how to create leverage. The biggest thing that we need in our lives is money, yes, but time. Once we get that money, how are we going to create time? How are we going to create systems so that we can teach others and they in turn can generate the revenue and the time that we need? And so we have courses like, you've probably just missed the article writing course, but there is an offline course, which is the sales page, how to write a sales page. So that's the landing page course. That's in Houston in October. You want to do one of those courses. You want to come to that course. You want to see how it's done. Or there is the cartooning course later in this year. Maybe you want to learn how to draw cartoons. You want to look at how a course is conducted, how the groups work, how the cue, reward, and routine are put into place, because that ends up in skill. Otherwise, you're just getting information, and information is pointless. There's too much information. What you want is the ability to do something, not more information. Anyway, what's the one thing that you can do today? The one thing that you can do today is to set up the reward. So maybe you want to achieve something. What is that reward? What is that reward going to look like? And what if you took away that reward? Would it still be a reward? Would you still have the cue? Would you still have the routine? If it doesn't work that way, if you feel, hey, this reward is nothing, then it's nothing. And some clients come up with an objection. They say, I don't need the reward. Yeah, you don't need the reward for one thing. But if you're doing 25 things in a day, then a lot of them are going to fall by the wayside. That one thing that you can do today is to look at what's not moving forward. For instance, I started learning Spanish and I moved ahead in Spanish and I've been speaking it for a while. But I found it was so difficult to keep myself motivated to learn phrases, to do all that kind of stuff. And my teacher, Manuela, would send it to me methodically and faithfully. And I found that I was just archiving it. Just archiving all those phrases in that text. And it was really bad because she was taking all this time to do this and I was archiving it without looking at it. And so I had to change that. I had to find a reward. And my reward was to make sure that I had pictures. So I have this little program that you've most certainly heard about. It's called Anki. I call it Anki. It's ANKI. And it's got this little blue star on it. So if you go to the iTunes store or you go to Android store, you're likely to find it, but there are, imitations. So look for the little blue star and it's ANKI. And I put in all the phrases. I tried to do all the cue and the routine and stuff, but the reward was the pictures. When I have pictures, I respond so much better. And so I would treat myself to like 10 pictures. And guess what? My Spanish has improved quite a lot. And this is by my own reckoning. It has improved quite dramatically because now I'm more interested than ever before. And this is the kind of thing that you have to do. When things are not happening, what is that one thing that you can do to put in that reward? And that brings us to the end of this podcast. What's happening in Psychotactics land? Well, I already told you, didn't I? I told you that we're going to have a cartooning course coming up. I also told you that we're going to have the sales page, the landing page workshop in Houston. That's on October 28th, 29th, and 30th. We have about 8 seats left. And again, these are small boutique workshops because it's about skill, not more information. So get to those workshops and learn how we're doing stuff, and that will enable you to do stuff in future without having all of these fancy technology tricks that everybody seems to want you to do. In the end, everything is a fair deal of work, and running a business means work. And if you can find a way to get customers to come back repeatedly, then you don't have to do any advertising. You don't have to learn all this fancy technology. You don't have to have all this constant SEO and doing all these crazy things all the time. That's how we run our business. We take 3 months off. We take the weekends off. We run a business that most of our competitors envy, and they tell us so. And as a client, I would like you to have that kind of lifestyle as well. So join us in 5000 BC and look at what we're doing, how we're doing it, and let's figure out how we can get you to the next point. So we'll see you in 5000 BC. That's me, Sean D'Souza, saying bye for now. Get your reward in place and let's get this show on the road. Bye for now.